Welcome to another episode of the Silman Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Batisto. Today's guest is Mitch Finesilver. Finesilver has been wrestling for the Cliff Keen Wrestling Club based out of Ann Arbor with his brother Matt. He spent the last 4 years as a resident athlete with the NYC Regional Training Center, represented Israel in the last 3 World Championships. His summer plans for representing Israel in the upcoming Olympic Games were unfortunately canceled. In college, Mitch was a 4-time NCAA qualifier, an NCAA All-American in 2019, as well as an ACC champ that same year. In high school, he wrestled for Cherry Creek High School in Colorado, where he was a 2-time state champion and a 4-time state qualifier. He also finished 5th his senior year at the Nationals High School Championships in Virginia Beach. Throughout high school and college, Mitch was able to be on the same team as his twin brother Zach, as well as his younger brothers Matt and Josh, who are also twins. Excited to share this episode with you guys, and I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Great.
At some point, I have like 2 Chihuahua pugs, so
Okay.
they just start yapping. So if I mute myself, that's why.
Honestly, my dog is barking a little bit too. I got a Frenchie, so she yaps a little bit sometimes herself.
When people ask you like what kind of dog do you have, like I don't know. I feel like you're a wrestler, you're a tough looking dude. Like people gotta be asking, oh, you gotta be having some kind of crazy, super tough beast, and you're like, nah, it's a Frenchie.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I wasn't gonna get a Frenchie, and then my girlfriend talked me into it, and I
That's what
absolutely
happens,
love the
man.
dog. Yeah, they're so funny. But I lost the battle.
Well, I think it started off with me. It was they were 2 Craigslist dogs, and we were just gonna
Yeah,
go look at them. We were gonna go look at them, and then yeah, I that was a mistake. Ended up getting
yeah,
both of
it's
them.
never just looking at them.
Mm-mm.
Funny.
Well, I was trying to think. I wrestled Matt when
Okay.
CCB because I wrestled at CCB and
Okay.
we dueled. It was at University of Northern Colorado, and we duel. It was like a tri duel.
Yeah.
And I remember, I can't, I want to say I wrestled before. No, I had to have been after you wrestled Coleman. And I was like super confused because it was normally when we do like tri duels or quad duels or something like that, Duke was, you guys came out and were wrestling Colorado. And I
Mhm.
was like, why are all these people like cheering against us? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
And I was, obviously I saw the lineup, and I think it was, I'm not sure all your brothers or just a couple of them were in there. But it was after the fact. It was like, yeah, they're from Colorado, and I was like, oh, that makes really good sense.
Yeah,
um,
honestly, that was like one of my cool moments in college, just because my like people back home hadn't really seen us wrestle in person. So it was cool to have like a crowd there just supporting us, and we got shirts made and everything. It was a cool time. Yeah. I remember that actually pretty vividly.
I can't remember how close is because yours. I want to say it was Cherry Creek High School. How close
Mhm.
is that to University of Northern Colorado?
I'm really bad with directions, but I want to say it's about like an hour and a half. It's a decent ways, but UNC is like it's called like Cowtown, USA. It smells like manure. So that's all I really know what Greeley is known for, besides that in the college, but it's a good little school. I like what Nickerson is doing there. He's doing a good
Yeah,
job.
no, I think yeah, I was a big fan of Leaders and the way that he wrestles, and honestly, I like I'm blanking on his name. Their 57 pounder is Urban maybe.
Yeah, Zerban.
Um,
He's
yeah, that
tough.
guy is just he's funky. He's weird,
He is so
but
funky.
he's
Yeah.
unorthodox. That's why I like it.
That's fair.
I was thinking about this, like I don't know if you get tired or if you get asked this question a lot, but
Mm.
dude, you wrestled in high school, I think, and as well as college with all 3 of your brothers, right? Like
Mm.
how unique do you think that is from your perspective, and maybe talk about that.
Honestly, from my perspective, it was just like a normal day. Like I've always wrestled with them. That's kind of how we got started in the sport is we were wrestling in the living room and my parents were like, all right, this you're gonna put holes in the walls, which we did. And they're like, let's put them in sports, and wrestling was one of those. And for me, it was just amazing to be able to be around them. One, because we ended up pushing each other a lot. Like we were really competitive. Lots of fist fights in the room. I think there's a few times I chipped my twin's tooth at one point just because we were fighting, which is not great, but that's part of it. So one, we pushed each other a lot, and two, like it was just so great to be with them in special moments in their careers, like some of them, winning state titles, placing at state, qualifying for nationals, placing ACC, stuff like that, just to be around them and maybe being a little piece of it because you trained with them or you worked with them on stuff. And, that was probably the most special thing for me to be able to compete with them. And I'm so fortunate for the years that we were together. We had 2 years in college, we had 2 years in high school, and, I wouldn't change it. Maybe I would actually get another year in there if I could.
If yeah, if only you had a COVID year,
Yeah, I
right?
wish. I got it out the
I,
wrong time.
yeah, I think it was. I think we're this. I think we graduated college the same year. It was 2019. I think,
Yeah,
right, was your
2019.
last year. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like right after that was dang COVID. But I honestly, I just feel so bad for some of the guys that I wrestled with, that were seniors that lost that last year. But I'm also on the other hand, I'm like I got to wrestle my last year, so I'll take it.
Honestly, yeah, you feel for those guys because a lot of them, like, I mean, I think of a dude like Taylor Lujan, who was like number one at nationals. He had, built his way up through the rankings through all his years and then, lose that opportunity. It's just a bummer.
Yeah,
So,
I'm trying. Yeah, Lujan was in there. Pat Lugo was kind of
yeah.
similar situation. Yeah, it sucks, And I think it's on the other hand, it was kind of cool seeing guys that um, maybe were able to kind of get that year back, but it didn't
Mhm.
necessarily work for the people that were seniors at that point didn't have any more eligibility. But kind of an
Yeah.
awkward thing.
It's a hard situation, especially if you're NCAA. I don't know what would have been the right answer. I guess you could have given those seniors an extra year, but I don't know. It's tricky. That whole span of a year, 2 years was just a weird time.
Yeah, what was it like for you? Like I know, so you finished school in 2019.
Yep.
I guess what were you doing in that time span?
So I finished school in 2019 and I had a few opportunities to keep training. But I decided to move to New York City and join the NYC RTC. So I was there for about 4 years, 4.5. But basically moved out there, started getting used to the senior level scene, and I ended up getting Israeli citizenship. I want to say middle of the year 2019. Because I knew I wanted to wrestle for Israel and represent my heritage, and it was a long process, honestly. It took me like anywhere between like 9 months to a year to complete the whole process and do meetings and interviews and get proof of my ancestry. But once I did that, I competed for the first part of 2020. So like first 3 months, and literally the last tournament they had before they shut everything down, I was in Italy, wrestling at European Championships there. And I remember reading the news, like COVID's in the north of Italy, and I was like, oh, like what is this thing? No one really knew.
Yeah,
So luckily, I didn't get stuck in Italy. Flew back. Things just kept getting worse and worse, eventually, my coaches were like, "Guys, I don't think it's right for us to, keep training." So that's when the shutdown happened. We went home. I think I was home for maybe like a month, but I was still working out with my brothers the best we could. And once we started, like things started to slow down, I was able to come back and train a little bit. And luckily, it sounds bad, but luckily Chamizo was in the US at the time. He kind of got
yeah,
stuck in the US during that time. So when I did get back to New York, I trained with him a good bit during that time, which was, obviously it's a great dude to train with.
yeah. What's he like to wrestle with?
He makes you feel like a little kid. That's probably the simplest way to put it. He is unlike any wrestler, obviously, I've ever touched, or most people I've ever touched. And, I think a lot of times he's misunderstood as he's a super showy guy, and he is to some degree, but he's actually got a really good heart. Like, he helped me a lot. Like, he didn't necessarily have to work with me as much as he did, and he took the time and would and train with me extra. And I appreciate him for that, but wrestling with him some days where it was maddening. He would just let you in on his legs and it'd feel like you're hitting a brick wall. Like his hips are so strong and so like they move so well. So, but I got a few takedowns here and there, but
Yeah.
it took some beatings. Majority of them were beatings for him, but I learned a lot.
Yeah, I feel like I mean being able to wrestle somebody like that where I mean and we both wrestle in college and you wrestle after. I
Mhm.
feel like especially with freestyle, I mean getting into somebody's legs is one thing, but then being able to finish and in freestyle not giving up exposures. And when you're
Yeah.
wrestling probably, one of the best guys in the world where he's really good when you're on his legs. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody can give you maybe a better feel than that. And especially his style. He does so many different innovative and creative things.
Yeah, honestly, that was like the biggest thing I had to learn when I moved to freestyle because I didn't do freestyle really throughout high school or anything. I started doing it a little bit in the summers for college, but it wasn't more than like a month or two in the year.
Yeah.
And I had a rude awakening when I got to the senior level of just like you can't just shoot and get on legs because you're gonna get
Yeah.
crotch lifted, chest wrapped. You got to be a little more tactical and um, it made me adjust my offense a little bit. I definitely pick my moments a lot more these days.
Yeah, I think about some of these high school states, and I'm pretty good friends now with a guy named Al Fontes. I don't know if you know who that is, but
I heard
he's
that
a
name.
he's a
Yeah.
writer for Intermat. He's like in the
Huh.
National Wrestling Hall of Fame, but he's from California and then moved to Idaho. And there's
Okay.
like this, whenever the state championships happen, there's always this talk about changing California possibly into multiple divisions, and
Hmm.
something similar is happening in Idaho where they have multiple divisions and want to make it one division.
Hmm.
Kind of just want to talk about like being in high school. I know you're a two-time state champ, I think four-time state qualifier.
Hmm.
What's the divisional situation like in Colorado, and then also like what's the exposure like, I guess, for colleges and being able to wrestle, I guess, in freestyle, I guess things like that.
I would put Colorado as a mid-tier state. Um, we produce a lot of good dudes, but our depth is definitely not there. In terms of divisions, there's four divisions, which is, in my opinion, a lot. I wish they would probably shrink it down to two or one. And I guess the reasoning behind it is like there's a lot of kind of on the plains of Colorado and the mountain towns. There's just not a lot of schools and kids in those schools, so they got to combine schools, and those lower divisions are those schools. But they every once in a while they'll produce some really tough kids, but I wish they would combine the bottom two and the top two divisions just because then you're getting into like a true state champ. I think in high school I was probably like on the other side. I was like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. But as you get older, you're like, it would have been so cool to be like a true state champ with one
Yeah.
division. I respect California, New Jersey, the states that do that. And I actually think it elevates the state as a whole because I mean you got to keep up. If you want to be a state
Yeah.
champ, you got to keep up.
Well, I know like I think like a good recipe is, obviously you want people to be able to come back to your home state or to your home area to be able to help develop wrestling.
Mhm.
And I think with having four divisions in Colorado, especially, it's like, like you said, it's like you have these mountain towns that are small, and then the
Mhm.
other half of Colorado is like these plains, which I think,
Yeah.
there's a ton of small towns there. Um, there's just maybe not enough competition, you
Mhm.
know, and I think maybe by combining some of those divisions, maybe that'll help with the competition part. But what I see like from states like Wyoming and Idaho, and it's got to be Colorado too, is I feel like you kind of have to go to some of these bigger national tournaments like Super 32 or Fargo, high school nationals. I guess what was that experience like for you? Because I know you went and wrestled. It was Virginia Beach maybe where you end up
Mhm.
getting fifth. Was that something that you felt like you had to do in order to get looks from colleges, or was that something that I mean, what I guess what went into kind of you going out for that tournament?
So for I guess Virginia Beach and Super 32 is more so me and my brother started going out there like my sophomore year. And it's more so like we wanted to do it just because we wanted to see the other competition. But as you get towards like recruiting age, like that's something you definitely got to do. The top guys who are probably four-time state champs in Colorado, they're getting looks no matter what. But if you're kind of like a one-time state champ, like you need to go and test yourself against that national competition because that's honestly what matters, especially if you're trying to take the next step to college. Like that exposure is huge, and just not only are you testing yourself against you know the whole country competition wise, you're just giving yourself more opportunities. You don't know whose eyes are going to be on you at some of these tournaments. And, lucky for my brothers and I, we were able to make a few connections when we were out at some of those tournaments, and they ended up blossoming into more and more opportunities. So I think definitely if you're like kind of in that mountain belt, Wyoming, Idaho, Colorado, you definitely need to go and get that exposure. And I will say Colorado was blessed in the sense that the Olympic Training Center is there. So you can get some exposure through that if you're, going up there and training. And a lot of guys make their rounds out there like for camps and stuff because
Yeah.
it's got the Olympic Training Center there. So exposure, it helps us that exposure is there. Maybe not so much like a state like Idaho or Wyoming where that's not there, but Colorado has that, which I think has elevated the state at least a little bit.
Yeah, I'm so stupid. I didn't even think about that. Was that something that you and your brothers were able to do? Were able to go up there and get some camps and wrestle with those guys up there?
A little bit in college. It's one
Yeah.
thing I wish when I was in high school that I took advantage of a lot more. Like it's like an hour, maybe like 50 minutes if you hit the traffic right from my house. And I wish my brothers and I probably would have just tried to, reach out and try to get in there as often as we possibly could. And I wonder who was training there at that time because the Olympic Training Center has gone in waves a little bit. Like
Yeah.
sometimes there's been like a ton of good dudes training out of the springs, and then I think now RTC model, it's kind of guys aren't necessarily staying there all the time, but there's still camps regularly. So I
Yeah,
would have liked
I
to do
can't think
more.
of anybody off the top of my head. I know some of the guys that maybe were wrestling and were like our representatives at the time for freestyle, but I don't with the RTC and even back then, like when we were in high school, like that was I think when RTCs and the college clubs were really starting to maybe expand.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's anytime you can maybe have that as a resource, it's great. But it's kind of a similar boat where it's like I didn't necessarily have a bunch of wrestling around me, so I kind of had to drive, if I want to
Yeah,
get those partners.
for sure.
Um,
And
go ahead.
go ahead.
You
I
go
was gonna say,
ahead.
like, my brothers and I were just really lucky, just because a lot of like our club, Mile High Wrestling Club back in Colorado, they drew a lot of the wrestlers from the OTCs to have us like either be regular coaches or like run camps for us. So we had like Chase Pammy, Zeke Jones
Yeah.
came did a camp for us, like just really good like wrestlers, and they would just pop in on a Wednesday or a Friday and run our practice, and that was great for us, you know.
Yeah, I think especially too, just the way that wrestling is just being able to network too. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like interacting. What you said Zeke Jones and Chase Pammy. I mean, both those guys. Zeke's coaching at ASU, and Chase Pammy has his club Gold Rush in Nevada. So,
Mhm.
um, I mean, yeah. Do you keep up with any of those guys that might have popped in?
Not so much those guys. So, we had a club coach. His name's Jared Haberman. I
Hmm.
keep up with him. I don't. You probably don't know who that is, but he's a four-time state champ from Colorado. But I want to say he was a two-time Division II national champ, and he was huge for us. And then also, do you know the name Nick Kamuchastegi?
Oh yeah, yeah. I know
Yeah,
Nick. Yeah.
he was our club coach for probably a year and a half, right before I went to college, and that was huge because he beat me up like bad a few times. I remember once he threw legs on me, and I thought my head was gonna pop off. He was just it
Well,
was like a rude awakening.
this is like post college, so he wrestled 74s, I think. So he had to have been maybe a little bit
He was
big.
big.
And
Yeah.
yeah, how would you wrestle in high school?
I finished my senior year at 126, so I was
He's a little bit bigger than
103.
you.
Yeah, he was a little bit bigger. I probably at that time I was probably like 140 if I had to guess. But yeah, I was one of those guys who was 98 pounds, wrestling 103 as a freshman, and then they changed the weights. I don't know if they did that for you, but in Colorado they changed the weights. I wrestled 113, then 120, 126. So, or no, I wrestled 106, not 113. Um, but yeah, little guy, and I didn't really grow until college, and even now, I would say I'm like middle sized.
Yeah, it's I yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting too because it's like when I was in high school, I I didn't necessarily grow a whole lot, but then as soon as it's weird, it's like as soon as I like really started lifting hard before my last year of college. I feel like I put on a lot of size and then I was able to kind of retain it. But if you see my brothers, so I got two other brothers. One is 6'4" and like 270,
Wow.
and then my other one's like 6'2" and I'm 5'10". And then all my cousins are over like 6 foot. My dad was over 6 foot, like both sides of the family, and I'm the runt. So
Did they
um,
wrestle?
yeah, so yeah, a little bit. My oldest brother did a little bit in
Gotcha.
high school, and then I had another brother that did a little bit longer. So I kind of felt like obligated to, like I had to. Do you feel like your younger brother? I mean, obviously, you got two sets of twins in the same house. I'm sure you guys were just wrestling each other all the time. But was it something that you felt maybe your other brothers felt obligated to because you and Zach were doing it?
I would definitely say even me, like myself, like I hated wrestling when I was did it as like a youth wrestler. I'd get so nervous, I'd cry every time I lost. Like I hated it. And but I did it just because my brothers did it. And I think maybe they had the same feelings, maybe not, and we just didn't talk
Yeah,
about it. But we stuck with it, and I think you fall in love with the sport. You learn to appreciate the values of like hard work, discipline, and all that stuff. And also we had really like I am forever grateful to have had great coaches early on in my career that help us fall in love with the sport. I talk about my probably the biggest influence in my wrestling career was my high school coach. His name's Camille DuPont, Coach Camille, at least to my brothers and I. And he would just give us opportunities in the summers, and we'd go and run the mountains with him every Saturday and then come back to his place and do push-ups and get at breakfast. And we did that probably like every weekend, in the off season and stuff like that. And, even to this day, I talk to him every single, like once a month at least, sometimes twice a month. And for me, like I am forever grateful that he was there for my brothers and I, and he did a lot of it for free. Like he wasn't getting paid to do that extra stuff with us. So,
yeah, I think so I'm a youth club coach and then I'm also a high school coach, and I think it's
mm,
kind of cool when you hear like stories about how you still keep up with your high school coach and the people that I mean we're 10 years out of high school, right? And
yeah.
it's like being able to kind of look back and be like, yeah, that person had a huge impact on me, and you still talk
Mm,
to them.
yeah.
Yeah, whenever I go to like state tournaments and stuff like that, I always kind of end up networking and talking to people that I knew from back when I was in high school, and that's gotta sound good, especially if your high school coach ends up listening to this. It's gotta feel good for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool because now things are starting to come a little bit full circle. Like he had his first kid, and I hopefully one day I'll be back in Colorado and I'll be able to coach his son or daughter. He
Yeah.
just had a daughter, but if he has a son or daughter and they wrestle, hopefully I can return the favor somewhat. He was that big impactful for my brothers and I that anything he would want, I'd be willing to help with, honestly.
Is that something you think about, long term, just going back to Colorado and working and coaching there?
I definitely would like to end up back in Colorado at some point. Probably not now, right now in my life.
Yeah.
But I would love to. I think it'd be amazing to open up a club in Colorado with my brothers. And I don't know how my old high school club that's there, Mile High Wrestling Club, would feel about that, but maybe they would welcome the competition because again, they helped my brothers and I out a lot as well. But it would be amazing to be able to, open a club there with my brothers and help build the Colorado community because a lot of those like not huge wrestling states, those clubs are really what are elevating them. You got to think of like Georgia and even like places like Florida, Tennessee. Like it's the club scene that's really, getting those dudes good. It'd be
Yeah.
cool to help do that in Colorado as well.
Trying to think of like a good club name. I feel like you have to go find Silver Wrestling Club or something like that.
I've thought about Fine Silver Wrestling Club. I also thought been thinking about maybe like Silverback, wrestling club and have like
Yeah.
a gorilla. I don't know. It's a workshop.
Yeah. I was trying to think too, like off the top of my head, like find silver would, but
Yeah.
then it's like we don't necessarily want to get silver in wrestling. We want to get gold. So it's okay. Well, you get the brain trust together and you can probably come up with a good name.
Yeah, I think so. That's down the line. First of all, we all got to move back, which I don't know if that'll even happen. So we'll see.
Yeah. So what I guess you know, kind of just going back, you come out of high school and or you're in high school, you're in your senior year and you're starting to look at different schools. I mean, how is the process, I guess, you and Zach both getting recruited to Duke? Was it something that, that was a conversation with the coaches like you guys were going to be a package deal? Was it something that you were both getting recruited to different places? I guess, there's a lot of family out there, people that have, brothers and siblings that wrestle with each other. And I feel like that's kind of a relatively common thing.
Mhm.
Was that something that, you wanted to do that process together, or was it something that you were kind of open, kind of just depending on the opportunities for each of you?
But right before we started the whole process, one decision that we made, we were like, all right, do we want to stay together? And I think I mentioned early on, one of the reasons that I think we had success early on in the sport was just because we pushed each other. Like we were just competitive, super competitive with each other. So part of the reason for us to stick together and ultimately for us deciding to do that was because of just being there to support each other, push each other, and you get a built-in best friend. And I know we leaned it on each other a lot in times when one of us was struggling. So that was kind of the first decision we made. And then from that point on, we reached out to a ton of schools, and one of the best things that my dad had me and my brothers do was just try to keep our grades up because not only just does the wrestling piece help you and open doors, but like I attended Duke, which I don't think I would have been able to get into had it not been for, wrestling, but I had at least good enough grades to get in. So they kind of helped each other really. And, we reached out to a ton of schools, like Stanford and UPenn and Lehigh and Air Force Academy. And, we settled on Duke just because it felt like it was the best fit for both of us. We had the opportunity to build something there that hadn't like historically hadn't really had a whole lot of success. And that was a big draw was just to build something out of nothing, and kind of be a pioneer. So that's kind of, and obviously Duke is a great academic school. And, another thing my dad would always say is like Duke's been the land of opportunity for my brothers and I. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, if I didn't continue wrestling right now, I could go get a job and be all right in life because I got a Duke degree and I attended a great university and I'm fortunate for that.
Yeah, I like how you said, you're able to kind of lean on your brothers,
Mhm.
especially when you go through some hardships. And with wrestling, obviously there's a ton of hardships that come with it. What was it like, I guess, being a Division I athlete at Duke, being able to try to balance, obviously a Division I practice and competition schedule, but also the intensity of being at Duke academically?
Well, I'll tell you what, the first year and a half was a big struggle, at least for Mitch. I think Zach fared a little bit better. And then my little brothers, I think we had warned them enough to be ready that they were. But my first year and a half, I struggled. I started out studying engineering and I quickly learned that I didn't like engineering that much. I wasn't very good at the math part of it, even though I thought I was. Um, so it just took time. It's like anything in life, you figure out how to be successful. Wrestling obviously is hard, and I think part of it too is early on in my college career is I didn't know how to prioritize that well. I didn't know how to organize my time. And I was spending more time in the wrestling room, and I wasn't using my time outside of the wrestling room effectively to keep getting good grades. So finding that right balance is really, what comes with time. And as you get older, you start to figure out like, do I need to read all 20 pages of this, or can I just skim the beginning and the end of this paragraph and get the gist of it? And you just figure out how to be successful. And I think that's really what college is about at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think so I'm a teacher too, and one thing that I talk about with my wrestlers is like school is very much a game, just like anything else. It's like you just got
Yeah,
to figure out how to play it.
for sure.
I think I was kind of similar. My first year is I was a really good student in high school, and then I got to college. And I'm like, all right, I made it. Like I'm on a Division I program. Like I'm in college. Like just smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And I heard I'm not gonna say who it is because well whatever. But he, yeah, is one of our alumni that come in working out with us, and he was talking about how when he was in school, like what he would do is he'd get the syllabus right for every single class, and he'd look at when the tests are, and figure out if you need to get the book or not, and then that would be, and he would just wouldn't show up to class until the test. I'm like, well, I'm smart enough. Like I can get by with that. And I remember I did that for one geology class, and I struggled with that class. The professor was from South Korea, and he had a very thick accent.
Mm.
And I didn't show up until the midterm, and I ended up not doing great on the midterm, surprisingly. you
Yeah,
know.
happened.
And I remember I walked past the coach's office, and they just like, "Hey, what the heck?" And I'm like, what, like I was going through my head, like, I went to practice this morning, like, I think I'm doing everything right. And they're like, you got a D on your midterm, and you missed like 5 attendance quizzes. And I was like, there weren't any attendance quizzes on the syllabus. So I had to make a right turn pretty quick. So
Yeah.
I just freaking doubled down. Like I went to every class, sat in the front. He posted the lectures ahead of time. I asked questions and somehow pulled off a B. And it was like kind of a turning point where I'm like, I can't just take things just trying to get by the easy way, because that's sometimes it's not going to work out. And
Yeah.
you get this opportunity and you don't want to waste it either.
Yeah, for sure. I could not agree more. And like, I'm probably stealing this saying from an old teammate. I'm pretty good friends with Jacob Casper. I don't know if you know him, but
Mm-hmm.
he used to always say how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think it rings true like so much, at least with school and wrestling, is like you gotta be, if you're getting it done on the mat, you gotta like balance it out and get it done in the classroom because it's just an effort thing with both of them, you know?
Yeah. No, and I think especially if, you're not necessarily like a hot shot, wrestler, and maybe you're super talented or super other things come naturally, which I think there's a lot of people that are into wrestling that aren't like that,
Yeah,
you have to work really hard. It's like those little things all stack up at the end. And it's like,
100%.
it sounds crazy. And I know I sound crazy when I talk to the kids that I coached, but it's like, oh, you showed up late to first period. Well, it's like that might equal you not getting a takedown at the state tournament. That's going to help you be a state medalist. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like that just because of that same saying. It's like how you do one thing is how you do everything. It's like if you're okay with taking that one shortcut, you're probably going to take a shortcut in your training too.
for sure. Could not agree more.
So I had a question. It's like I know maybe it was your junior year. You end up upsetting Xerxes maybe on the backside
Mhm.
of the NCAA tournament. He ended up losing to Oliver from CMU in the round of 12. And then the next year you come back and you All-American. What I guess was something that in your mind or you feel like maybe changed, or what was something that maybe you honed in on between your junior year and your senior year where you're like, how do I get on the podium that next year?
Um, I think it was a mix of things. Um, One, I started meeting with a sports psych. Um, and I used to be like, oh, I don't need that. Like what's a sports psych gonna tell me? Like I'm already tough. Like I already know how to wrestle. But it really helped me to be able to dissociate myself from wrestling to some degree. So what I mean by that is like no matter if I win or lose, I'm still Mitch Finesilver. You know, that's gonna be the same for me for the rest of my life, you know, and he'd always say he's like, you don't have to be special when you go out on the mat. If you did the right things in the wrestling room, you don't have to be special. You just got to be you, you know, and I really took that to heart. And, I think that got me to a point in my career where I was like, like, why am I putting so much pressure on myself? Because it's just causing me to tighten up in big moments, you know. And there'd be times when I'd wrestle free, and then I'd get to a big match, and I'd tighten up, and you know, it'd be a 1-1 match, and I'd barely win off of like a last second takedown. When in reality, I probably could have gone out and scored 2 or 3 takedowns, you know. And once you kind of get that mentality, like I feel like the best when I've wrestled the best times in my career is when I've had that, I'm either going to win or lose. Let's go out and have fun with this and put your best foot forward, try to be the best version of you that you can possibly be in that moment. And, that kind of helped me, I think, get over the hump. I kind of my senior year, unfortunately, I wanted to win a national title, but I got upset by Austin O'Connor. Me and him had wrestled 6 times that year.
Yeah.
I think going into that quarterfinal match, I was 3-1 against him. And to his credit, he prepared well. He had a good game plan for the match, and he beat me in overtime. And after that, I remember I would be pretty superstitious, and I'd always wear same warm-ups, same t-shirt underneath warm-ups, all this stuff. And I got to the point where I was like why am I superstitious about this stuff, And I remember going into that blood round match my senior year, and I was like, all right, like this jacket that I'm wearing every time I warm up, it is hot and it's sweaty and I'm uncomfortable. So I was like, I'm taking this off because if I win or lose, I at least want to be comfortable, and like that's literally what I thought. And
Yeah.
I was like, it is like let's just wrestle. At the end of the day, it's just wrestling, and I went out and I won that blood round match and was able to wrestle through and end up getting to third, fourth, and ironically, I ended up wrestling Austin O'Connor again. So me and him are 3-3 in our career. He's my last two college losses, unfortunately, but it worked out. It makes it feel a little bit better that he ended up and going to win two more national titles after. So he's
Yeah.
nobody.
He's definitely not a nobody. So what I think is super interesting about, your story when with sports psychology is like you're not going to change who you are whether you accomplish the results aren't going to change who you are. And I think it's almost counterintuitive when we talk about how you have this kind of routine and this superstition with your jacket. And it's
Mhm.
like you were able to kind of in a way kind of free yourself by taking off the jacket. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? And
100%.
it's like on the one hand, it's like this is so important to you, but at the same time, it's like the reason you're doing it maybe necessarily isn't going to be the result, and that kind of allows you to kind of get the result.
Yeah, 100%.
Which
And
it's kind of a weird thing to coach, and it's also a weird thing maybe to like talk to somebody that doesn't quite understand that. You know what I mean?
I remember my senior year, and again, this came from working with that sports psych, is I had like a ton of superstitions. I would try to break one of them each new competition. So by the end of the year, I basically had them all like cast it off of me. And I just could wrestle free. But it is a weird thing to think about. Like I think there's a difference between routine and superstition, right? A routine is good because it lets your body know that it's getting ready for a match time routine, you're getting warmed up, stuff like that. But superstition, they can hold you back. And if it's something that's holding you back in big moments, that's a problem. That's got to be addressed.
Can you talk about some of your other superstitions?
I'm trying to think. I was a big like wear the same stuff. So like jacket, shirt
Yeah,
underneath, same underwear, socks. If it's a 2-day tournament, and this is probably kind of gross, and people are gonna judge me for this, I'd let them hang and dry, and I'd just put them back on right before instead of putting a new shirt on, and it was stuff like that. I
that's
had
pretty
this other
common in
one
wrestling, though. You know what I mean? People wearing the
that
same stuff.
that is a common one. I had this other one where if I would get a bad thought in my head. And I don't know, it started when I was in high school. I would knock on wood. You know the expression like knocking on wood. So I'd go and I'd find wood. So if it was like a gym floor, I'd go knock on the wood floor, or I'd find a broom handle, and that
Oh
was
my
a little
gosh.
crazy. Yeah. But it helped me when I was in state, like in high school, and I remember doing that before my state finals matches. And I don't know, whenever I'd get a good thought, or a bad thought, I would do that, and you start to realize that doesn't really have that big of an impact.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I had any like superstitions. Like I would definitely I would try to have like the same song would play
Mm,
before I wrestled. It was Simple Man by Leonard Skinner.
it's a good
So
one.
I would play that song, over and over again. And yeah, I don't know. When I was in college, I stopped doing that. I was like, all right, I've moved on. But I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if it was that a superstition or was it a routine. I think it definitely kind of helped me get ready for my match. But I
Yeah.
think on one hand, I also kind of relied on it a little bit too much because like if I didn't finish the song, it would like I don't know somehow mess with my mind. So yeah, it's weird how many like superstitions there are with sports and people competing like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if I know of any other teammates that had really weird ones, but sometimes they'll eat you up if you don't get them done, like if you don't do them. So I'm glad I didn't have anything too bad like that.
Yeah. No, I I wanted to ask, kind of what happened after college.
Yeah.
You already talked about how you try to get your citizenship for Israel, and we're planning on. Were you already like what's the qualification process, I guess, to make a world or Olympic team for Israel?
So the cool thing for me is I had gone and trained out in Israel enough that they felt confident enough for me to represent them at these tournaments throughout the world. So I didn't have to necessarily wrestle in the nationals. I have competed in a national-esque tournament where um, I wrestled with other Israelis, but majority of the time they've been like, all right, like you came and trained with us, you proved yourself, like we're gonna support you. And they've been super supportive. They've never said no to a tournament I wanted to go to. They've never said no to a training camp I wanted to go to. So they kind of gave me free reign to one, stay in the US and train at in New York and then now in Michigan. And two, just kind of deciding and planning out my competition schedules.
Yeah, and I feel like I know maybe for 3 years, or I know you wrestled at three different championships, right?
Yeah, I
And
think it
all
was.
three of those, I think you were at New York RTC.
Mhm.
Um, that's got to be a great place, I guess, for flying internationally, right?
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier. Now that I'm in like Ann Arbor, Michigan, Detroit isn't as friendly, whereas like tri-state area, like I could fly out of Newark, I could fly out of JFK, I could fly out of LaGuardia, and they fly everywhere in the world. So it was really convenient. And I was doing like early on in the senior level, I was doing a lot of travel. I don't do as much anymore just because I don't feel it like I need as many tournaments. I'm
Yeah.
pretty used to international guys, but early on when I was on the senior level, like I wanted to get my hands on as many foreigners as possible so I could feel it because it's just different than the American style.
So yeah, I know you talked about Chamizo. Like, how would you describe maybe the difference between European wrestling or really just international wrestling compared to wrestling Americans?
I'll say each country, not necessarily country, but each kind of continent has a little bit of its own style. So Europeans are very like they're not going to necessarily take a ton of risks, but when they get to a leg, they're so strong positionally in on that leg that they're going to finish. Or so for me, it was like I can't let them lock their hands on my leg because they're going to finish. Japanese are different. They're so quick. They move well side to side. But in general, like wrestling the Russians and stuff, like if you feel like you're safe, you're probably not. Like they're gonna like explode and pop, and their whole idea, especially like I trained in Dagestan for 10 days. Their whole idea is like they're gonna lull you to sleep and kind of just rope a dope you. They'll let you think that you're in control, and then boom, they'll explode and take you down or for you, and stuff like that. And that stuff is a feel for sure.
Hmm.
Just knowing that I can't relax in this position or I'm gonna get exposed.
Yeah, I mean, what was it like going to Dagestan? I mean, that's like wrestling capital of the world. I feel like
It
in a lot of
was
ways.
it was honestly an amazing experience just because like that is the center of the wrestling world to some degree. Um, we walk in a gym and before the senior level practice, there's the kids practice and there's probably like 100 to 200 kids across three mats, and they're in this wrestling school. Like they learn school and they train three times a day, and it's you start to realize why Russia is so good because they're picking these kids from the villages in Dagestan and throughout the other republics of Russia, and they're putting them in these wrestling schools, and then they're around all the other kids and they're being able to get exposed to senior level guys slowly as they get older and as they get better. Like I remember I was wrestling with a 17-year-old and I'm like, I was probably 23 at the time. I was like, this is a good 17-year-old. Like this kid knows what he's doing. And it's just in their culture a lot. And not to say it's not in the American culture, but you just don't see it as much growing up. There's a lot of other sports in the US.
I mean, historically, I want to, I get Chechnya and Dagestan sometimes mixed up, but I want to say all the people at Dagestan at one point got moved out of the valley and sent to Siberia for like maybe like I don't know, I can't remember the exact amount of time, but pretty much like a generation, and then we're allowed to move back. So it's
Yeah,
like you talk about like they're fighting against the Soviet Union and you know all just maybe the tough upbringing that comes out of there. It's like yeah, no wonder like high level grapplers and wrestlers come out of there. You know, it's like
yeah,
just being tough is a part of living there.
yeah. And that's honestly wrestling is their way out. It's like that's their way out of poverty, really, is like Dagestan's not a it's not a like a wealthy region or anything by any means, but when you're at that wrestling gym, you're seeing G-Wagons, Mercedes, BMWs. It's because that's where the money's going, you know? That's their way
Yeah,
out of poverty.
yeah, it's wild. Um, so, dude, I want to talk about just you know kind of what's happened recently with you, you know, and maybe kind of just start at the beginning. Um, yeah, you know, I honestly I was kind of like I was talking to a couple people. It's like you know the whole situation, what's happening in the Middle East is kind of maybe an awkward thing, at least for me to be able to talk about, and we don't necessarily need to
Yeah.
talk about that, but you know, from your perspective and on the wrestling side of things, you know, what was maybe that process like, you know, from maybe your training to go and wrestle for the Olympics or go maybe you had to go through the qualification process first. You know, maybe kind of start there and we'll kind of just go into the story from there.
I mean, I'll say when I joined the Israel team, I knew that it was not going to be free from, just I don't know if ridicule is the right word, but just eyes. Like there's eyes on me at a lot of these tournaments just because, oh, it's Israel. Or if there's a tournament where Iran's there too, there's going to be eyes on you. And I knew that was going to be the case, but I didn't really expect the extent of it some of the times. Like I've traveled with, security at a majority of these tournaments. There's a lot of tournaments where, I mean, whenever I travel, like it's supposed to be like you're not from Israel, you're American, which is like there's just security protocols that we have to follow, and that's something that's always the case. Just because, you're wrestling for a place that is under political scrutiny, usually throughout the rest of the world. And there's a lot of safe places, obviously, but you can never be too safe. But with that being said, uh, basically after Worlds, I didn't qualify at Worlds, which was, you know, only five guys really qualify. But when October 7th happened, um, I was like, oh, like, one, this is terrible and awful and sad, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I just knew that there was going to be some repercussions down the line. And I was hoping at some point that things would resolve enough that, potentially peace could happen and there would be a chance. Not to say, and I sound selfish, obviously, because a war is getting fought right now.
Yeah.
But from my mind, it's like, all right, like hopefully I can still represent my country, you know. And as time went on and you read in the news, you're like, I don't know if this is gonna happen. We were fortunately able to wrestle in Baku, um, and that was the European qualifier. And we had a pretty good amount of security with us, but Baku was pretty safe. They treated us super well there. The government did. They helped protect us, and I felt extremely safe in Baku. And with a month kind of in between Baku and Istanbul, yeah, we just didn't know really leading up to the tournament. Um, and for me, I'm like, well, I gotta keep training. I gotta
Yeah.
stay ready. Like if I get that opportunity, I'm gonna take it. And each day went by, and we didn't really have an answer. And then I think it was last Friday, we finally got the final answer. And I knew that things were not looking good when they told us that the decision was going to come early in the week, and then it didn't come. And I was like, all right, it's each day. I was like, well, this does not seem good. They're probably still fighting it. And then last Friday, I found out that it was deemed too big of a security risk for us to go. And I don't know if you followed the news between Turkey and Israel, but
Not of recently, but go ahead.
politically, they have kind of they haven't cut off completely, but they've definitely lessened their political ties. Like I think Turkey cut their exports to Israel. Um, Turkey hosted the leader of Hamas, and as I'm seeing this stuff, I'm like, this does not bode well for the Israel team going to Turkey,
Yeah.
and that ended up being the case, and it's unfortunate and it's sad, and um, but that's the world we live in right now, and it's just the situation. I could sit here and mope about it, but I have a pretty great life as is. I've had great experiences in the sport. So I can hang my hat on that, you know.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I talk about the dang dogs, and now they're barking in the background here, but like probably the worst possible time too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I obviously, I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine training really hard for something like this, and then kind of things outside of your control, having it kind of being taken away from you. And I think it goes back to maybe a little bit of what the sports psychology kind of talked about. It's like it doesn't change who you are. You know what I mean? As much as it sucks, it doesn't change who you are. And like what you said, like you have other good things that are happening in your life. It's like you're not just a wrestler. And I think that kind of mentality I think is so common. I think especially with a lot of younger people is this is it. It becomes a piece of their identity, and then when things
Yeah.
don't maybe shake out the way that you would like them to, it's the end of the world. But yeah, it seems like you're kind of keeping a cool head, and I'm sure when you first got the news, I'm sure it was kind of emotional and maybe um, yeah, hard to process. I'm sure. Um, yeah, it's got to be tough, dude.
Yeah, it was definitely emotional. And I remember like even now, like I haven't been sleeping great, but that week leading up to that decision, I was like waking up super early, expecting because Israel is ahead of time. So I was
Yeah.
expecting that to wake up to a message to a yes or a no. And I remember waking up that Friday and I got the message and it just drained me. And I was like, well, what do I do now? And luckily, I was able to disconnect and I again took a step back and realized one, life is bigger than wrestling. And I was like, all right, well, I can still go to practice and help my Cliff Keen teammates achieve their goals. And that's what I did. I went to practice and I wrestled hard and tried to help them the best I can. And um, yeah, I think like you said, it is dangerous if you tie your life to your identity to one thing and it doesn't happen, like that's a dangerous way to live.
I mean, you still go into those Cliff Clean practices. I mean, that shows your character, and that I think that shows your toughness, and that's also shows you're a good teammate. And I feel like there were guys that I'm sure we both wrestled with in college, and other places that maybe didn't have their shot. Like I remember having to wrestle one of a guy that was actually my former roommate, kind of for a starting spot, and I was getting ready for conference and postseason stuff. He was still in there training. It's like you didn't
Yeah.
need to be in here, you didn't need to be in, the Cliff Keen wrestling room, but you were, and you were helping guys like Amin and not even just the whole room that's in there. I mean, you guys have a pretty solid wrestling club.
Mhm.
A lot of guys that wrestle at different places in the world, and you're in there and you're training alongside them. That's got to give them, in a lot of ways, some inspiration too.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to do that just because they're just good guys, and I know they do the same for me. But yeah, I mean, it's the least I can do. They've always been good friends and supportive, and it. I'll tell you what, I didn't want to go to that practice. It was the last thing I wanted to do that day, but also it's kind of like it's just part of my routine. I always say I wrestle to live and I live to wrestle. Like it gives me life to some degree to be able to go and do the sport I love. Um, so maybe it's a little selfish in that way. Uh, but I think we all do that for some wrestle for that reason sometimes. We just
Yeah, I
love.
mean it's kind of a balance. It's like you love the sport, and even
Yeah.
though it's kind of like, I mean, that's kind of what love is too. It's like it's not always perfect.
No,
You have to take the bad with the good at times,
for
and
sure.
again, dude, you go into practice though. I mean, it's maybe in a lot of ways is kind of dealing with maybe that frustration, that emotion is still going to practice.
Yeah. I mean, I still love the sport, but yeah, maybe it is a little bit coping. And when I'm wrestling, I don't think about all the outside stuff. It's one of the few times I feel like I can truly disconnect from the world, and just be in that moment. I think that's part of the reason I do love the sport, because everything just goes silent outside of that 6 minute match or, hour and a half practice, what, um, But yeah,
It just allows you to be present.
yeah,
And I
present.
think,
That's a really
you know,
good.
in a world where it's hard to do that sometimes, you know, with technology and phones and stuff like that, it's like, you know, when I'm coaching or working out or whatever, I just try to put my phone away and just be present. And I don't know. I think I think part of the reason why you end up building these special bonds with people is everybody in that room is doing something that they enjoy and everybody wants to be there. And there's no other thing that's happening, you know, that really anybody cares about that's outside that wrestling room and everybody's present. I mean, that's got to be super enjoyable, especially, you know, where you're at right now with all those guys that are in there. You know, being in that room and you know, was that something where you know you were at the you know the NYC RTC, you leave there? Is that something that when you knew like Mitch was transferred over there, was that something that you were thinking, you know, I kind of want to go and wrestle with my brother again? Possibly, was that something that you were thinking about?
For me, it was more so, I knew that if I had if I was gonna really give this a go at the Olympic level, like I wanted to put myself in the best position possible. And obviously, like you can't beat Cliff Keen Wrestling Club. Like they got the partners, they got the coaches. And it was either gonna be there or Penn State, and I already had the connection with my brother being at Cliff Keen, and it was an easy transition. I knew a lot of the guys wrestle for other countries, and
Yeah,
um, I made the decision to just give myself the best chance to be in Paris. And if I look back at it now, I would not change a single thing. You know, I would do it again and again and again because I took a leap of faith. And, I think as a wrestler, not only as a wrestler, but as a human being, I've just been able to grow so much in my time out here. Because it was just a whole new world, like I kind of had worked my way up it while I was in New York and um for me coming to Ann Arbor, you get humbled some days, wrestling miles, you
yeah.
get humbled wrestling. I mean, I did a hand fighting go with Deeringer, and he held my head down for 3 minutes straight,
He's
like
got to be
come
strong.
on. He's
He's got to be so strong.
he's one of the strongest people I've ever met. But even the college guys, like they're good, and they want to be good and they got a shared goal. And some days are humbling and some days you humble them. So it's just a great community to be in. And like I said, I'm fortunate they were willing to, let me welcome or join them. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe outside the wrestling room a little bit, being in out and in Ann Arbor when you're there, you know, what's maybe that culture like? What's that vibe like? Maybe you know, how is it maybe a little bit different than being in New York or being at Duke or being in Colorado?
I'll say New York is very, very fast paced. I mean, everyone says that. There was times I enjoyed that, but I'm like the song you're saying, I'm a simple man, and I think to some degree, just getting on the subway every day, like that's just not me. That's not who I am at the end of the day. And I appreciate um, I don't want to say like how slow paced Ann Arbor is because it's not like that slow. It's not like you're in Iowa or something, but I do appreciate how it's a little bit more laid back. There's a lot more, greenery and people just I think are a little more present. They're not just trying to work, work, work. They're not just breezing by you on their phone or, trying to get to the next train. You're able to stop and smile at people and um, while I enjoyed my time in New York because I was young and it was, I met my girlfriend there and um, that was amazing. And, I do appreciate the simple living of Ann Arbor and um, yeah, I like Ann Arbor. Also, the food is great here. I don't know if I talked about that, but
Oh,
Ann Arbor has really good food, and I did not expect that when I moved here, especially coming from like New York City area. 'Cause
yeah,
they got everything in New York. But Ann Arbor holds its own, in my opinion.
huh? Yeah, I feel like that's unexpected, especially
Yeah.
you go from New York where it's like, you know, I mean, I'll just say this: there's a lot of restaurants in New York,
Hmm.
where maybe you go to Ann Arbor and maybe, you know, those obviously there's less because it's a smaller place, but they probably stand out a little bit more.
I think that's a good way to put it. Have you been to Ann Arbor?
Um, I don't think so. I don't think, no, we never wrestled
Yeah.
there. Uh-uh.
So the person who told me about the food scene was originally Miles, Miles Amin. and I didn't really like believe him. But my few trips before I moved here, like the food has always been awesome, and they got like I don't know why it is. Maybe it's just because it's a big college town, and that's something they're passionate about. But the food just like they do have spots that are just so solid that like you're like this is a fantastic meal.
What kind of food?
They got everything. There's a place called Frida Batitas that does like these really good burgers and like I don't even know what it is, but it's like it's not a smoothie or a milkshake. It's like a mix between the two. But they got like a place like
Like
that.
a
There's
like a tea?
it's not tea. It's like it's thick like like a smoothie, but it's like made with I want to say like cream or something. It's called a batita.
Okay.
Um,
Right.
at least that's what they call it there. But that's really good. There's this Italian place called Monty that's really good and I had some of the best pizza. Just like it's not traditional pizza, but it was like a pistachio pizza, which sounds kind of crazy, but it was really good. Um, Trying to think what else. Yeah, they got like I said, they hold their own with New York City. And people probably will get mad for me saying that, but I think it's true.
I mean, it's got to be maybe a hot take.
It is,
Um,
yeah, it might be a hot take.
yeah, I'll clip that part and then I'll post it on Instagram and then tag a bunch of places in New York.
That's fair.
What? So I feel like with Michigan, obviously just in the wrestling news they get not necessarily a lot of heat, but maybe the trying to think of the right wording, maybe the reputation of being really taking advantage of the transfer portal.
Mhm.
Um, what's interesting though is I watched it was maybe yeah, it was right before the Nationals, and Sean Bourmet and Shane Griffith and Austin Gomez and those guys were warming up, and it just seems like they have such a camaraderie,
Mhm.
and Bourmet and oh man, why am I blanking? Just the coaching staff there just does a really good job, I think, of building that rapport. Is that something that in your time that you've been there, is that something that maybe you see or that you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I'll first say that I think yes, Michigan does take advantage of the transfer portal and I a little bit, but I think it's also misunderstood to some degree. A lot of those dudes that have transferred, like they've had relationships with like Bourmet and KJ and Trella long before, they even started college. Like a dude like Austin Gomez, like he went to Iowa State originally because of KJ,
Yeah.
and part of his motive for one coming to Michigan and then also, coming back in the lineup was just because of KJ. He wanted to be able to wrestle under KJ in college, and so I think it's a little bit understood in that sense, but I do think they do a really good job. Like those dudes that transferred in, they fit right into the culture. It was almost like when I came in, like they do a good job, and again it's high level dudes who have a shared common goal, like we all want to improve, and that's where I'm saying like me joining that it just elevated my game because I was again around people with a shared goal, to be the best version of yourself you can be, and that just helps. If you got people around you who care about you and love you, and the coaches, they pour into you, and it's easy to go out and wrestle 6, 7 minutes for them every match.
Yeah, and I think another part of I like your point. It's like it's a little bit misunderstood. Most of these guys that are coming in are grad transfers. Like they've already
That
put
too.
their time in. They've already put their time in to another
100%.
place. They graduated. They got a bachelor's degree or maybe a master's degree from somewhere else,
Mhm.
and they've completely spent. A lot of times there are options there. Like I know Shane Griffith. He probably. I think if you wanted to continue to do it, you could try to, I guess, be a doctor. But it's like your options get kind of limited. And it's like, you know what? You have this other year. It's a COVID year. Why not go somewhere else and just get a different experience? And then plus, you look at the network, that
Yeah.
comes with coming being out of Michigan too.
Yeah. I mean, my brother did the same thing. He went to Duke. He got a master's from Duke. Could he have stayed at Duke and gotten another degree? Yes, but it was his opportunity to one be a part of a big time program and wrestle in front of a Big Ten crowd. Like I remember going to his or seeing his duels, and I'm like, this is a different experience, and you can't fault a kid for wanting that at least a little bit, and like a guy like Matt or a guy like Shane or some of the Northwestern guys like Lucas, like. you know, you can't fault them for, wanting to expand their horizons. Like you said, they did their time at their traditional programs and they a lot of them like represented those programs great, and you can't fault them for, changing for that last year.
No, for sure. Um, did you go to nationals this last
Uh,
year?
Not this last year. This is the first time since I went my freshman year, so was that 2015 that I had not been. Yeah.
I haven't been. I never qualified, and I would love to go. I was actually going to go the dang COVID year. I had already bought my ticket, was making plans, and of course it got canceled. But I'm going to make a pretty good effort, I think, to go to Philadelphia
Yeah.
next year. But since you've kind of been with Michigan for a little bit, you go there. Are you going to be wearing Duke stuff? Are you going to be wearing Michigan stuff?
I'll tell you what, so when I went for my brother's last year when he was at Michigan, I kind of did a 1 day thing. So I was in New York City with Columbia. Obviously I graduated from Duke and Matt was wrestling for Michigan. So I'd wear like Columbia when I was around the Columbia guys, and then I'd have a sweatshirt on that was either like Michigan or Duke, and I'd be rotating them all. And I think I probably settled on mostly Michigan stuff just because I wanted to see, Matt do well. But I tried to balance it out as much as possible.
Yeah, that's got to be a pain in the rear too.
Yeah, I
Having to
mean,
switch out all the
they
time.
all understand it. Like you can have ties to multiple places, and obviously that was the case. So, but I gotta say, you definitely got to get out there. I think of the like I've wrestled at 3 world championships, and it is nothing compared to the NCAA championships. Like there is no show greater than the NCAA championships. I honestly mean that. Like you can't. It's the best wrestling in the world, just like as a showcase. Not like maybe technically, but showcase wise, like it is a great experience.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, going to the town and just experience the history part. Like, so I teach history, so like I know I'm
Mhm.
gonna love that part. I plan on kind of going with like a good sized group of my friends, so like that's gonna be fun. And then plus, it's like getting to run into people that people from all over the country, people I've had on the show before. It's like that's gonna be so much fun. And then you get to watch the wrestling part.
Yeah, that's
Like that
like
that's really fun too.
it's
Um,
amazing.
I mean, right now it's like the last couple of years is I have like multiple screens in my classroom, so I just put up like a bunch of different mats happening at the same time. But
Fair.
yeah, nothing's gonna beat. I don't think actually being there and being able to experience like the tournament itself. But
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully I get a chance. I get married this summer, so I say like right
Okay.
now I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
But we'll see when fiance becomes wife. If what
Yeah.
happens. But um,
Will
no,
she go with or no?
I actually joked about it. I was like, "Hey, like let's plan this trip. You could bring your friend because like she doesn't. I mean, she loves wrestling. Her little brother, and that's actually how we ended up meeting. Is her little brother wrestled for our club, but which you're not supposed to do
Yeah,
apparently.
right.
But yeah, yeah, I was like, you could bring your friend, and then I could go enjoy the tournament with my friends, and then you could just hang out in Philadelphia, and then at night we can meet up again.
I
And
need I
she
need I
said
need
she
to
said she
sell
was down.
that. I need to sell that same idea to my girlfriend because she doesn't come from a wrestling background really. But I'm like, you got to go to nationals. Like it's just such a good time. And she's like, well, I'm like, I think you'll enjoy it. So I gotta convince her with the same idea.
Yeah, bring a friend. I think it was I actually brought her over to go watch the Nationals with like a couple of my buddies at
Mhm.
one of their friends' house, and like she was hanging out with my buddy's wife, while it was going on, and I'm getting all excited between the matchups and stuff. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is an upset. Messenbrink didn't know the dang the riding time, and like
Yeah.
this is awesome, and she's like, oh, that's cool, you
What's
know,
writing time?
yeah, yeah. Well, hey man, I know we've been going over an hour. I really appreciate you coming on, and this was, honestly, this was super fun. Just kind of get to talk to you about your story, and
Sure.
anytime you want to come on, and you feel like something you want to talk about or want to share, you just to catch up. Like I'm always down.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on here and share my story a little bit. And even if you wanted to get all four of my brothers on here, it might be a little hectic, but we'd love to do it. It was great talking to you. I appreciate
That sounds super fun, actually.
it.
You guys. So, all right, last question before I let you go. Have you guys ever thought about doing a podcast?
we were trying to, this is kind of a point of contention, but we were trying to start one a few months ago. And I don't want to put my twin brother on blast, but he's been kind of slowing it down. Him and actually Josh, but mostly Zach. He's been kind of just like MIA a little bit and just
Yeah.
busy with life. And I get it, we all get it, but also we got to get a podcast started, you know. But we're
Dude,
still
do it.
workshopping ideas, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, we let me stop recording. I can maybe talk about like kind of my process a little bit. And
For sure.
I think you could probably do it pretty easily. That was episode 54 with Mitch Finesilver. If you guys enjoy the show, please like, leave a comment, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel and Spotify. If you want to check out any past episodes of the show, you can go on Spotify, you can go on YouTube, you can check out CaliWrestling.com, the place for all California wrestling. We are on Spotify, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. See you guys next time.